All right, so now let's move on to another problem, okay, and which is known as the infinite square well potential or particle in a box. Now, particle in a box is a very important problem because the solution to this problem has many applications. You will also see its application in spectroscopy. You will see its application when people try to study electron being trapped inside a metal, okay, or electron trying to cross a barrier and all of this. So there is a lot of application of this kind of square well potential in semiconductor industry, right? And also in spectroscopy. So we are going to learn about this problem, and slowly we are moving to getting to solve the hydrogen atom problem. Okay. All right. So first, so this problem, okay, so what is this problem? So essentially we are considering that there is a particle of mass m which is inside a potential, and the potential is infinity on the two sides. So between 0 and a, the potential is 0, right? V of x is 0. And at 0, the V of x is infinity, and at a also V of x is infinity. Okay, so it's a very high potential, obviously. The potential is infinity, which means that the particle cannot go out of this potential at all. Okay. Now, since this particle is trapped inside this region, so the particle can only be between 0 and a. Okay, this means that this problem is like a bound state problem, right? The particle is bound in a small region, and so this is a bound state problem. Okay, this state represents a bound state. And one of the things that we have learned, right, the theorems that we saw in the beginning of the chapter, there are two theorems. First theorem states that if the particle is in a bound state, then the energy levels are going to be discrete, right? So that is one of the theorems that we learned. And the second theorem that we learned had to do with the non-degeneracy of the energy levels, right? So the eigenfunctions are going to be non-degenerate. So these are the two theorems, and now because these two theorems are applicable for this bound state, let's see if we actually get back if this is true, right? Of course, this has to be true if the theorems holds, right? So we will solve the Schrodinger equation, and we'll see if whatever we've said earlier in the beginning of the chapter, if that holds true. So the problem is set up as such, right? Consider a particle of mass m confined to move inside an infinitely deep asymmetric potential well. Okay, this is asymmetric because the well is from 0 to a. If it was symmetric, it would have been from minus a to a, or from minus a by 2 to plus a by 2, like that. Okay, then it would be a symmetric well. But because this is going from 0 to a, this is asymmetric. Okay, so V of x is plus infinity for x less than 0. It is 0 between 0 and a, and it is plus infinity again for x greater than a. Okay, so this is our problem, and now we have to solve for this problem. Okay. All right. So what happens classically, the particle will remain confined inside the well, okay, and it will move with some momentum, which is root of 2me, but it can move in either direction. So it might move here, then hit the wall, then get reflected back, then move here, hit the wall, and then reflected back. So it will keep reflecting and bouncing back and forth between these two walls. Okay, so that is what is going to happen classically. So classically, the particle remains confined inside the well, moving at constant momentum, which is plus or minus root of 2me, back and forth as a result of repeated reflections from the walls of the well. Okay. So, but quantum mechanically, so classically, the energy can be anything, right? It can take any energy, just that it will still be bound. So if it has a higher energy, then it will, right? So if energy is very high, then according to this formula, the momentum will be very high, right? So velocity is going to be very high. If energy is low, then the velocity might be low. Okay. but the energy can vary continuously. There is no restriction on what the energy has to be, right? Energy can be anything here. But quantum mechanically, this represents a bound state because the particle is trapped between this length 0 to a. Okay, so it represents a bound state. So again, so like I've said earlier, the two theorems stated in the beginning of the chapter will be valid. So in a one-dimensional problem, the energy levels of a bound state system are discrete and non-degenerate. Okay, so the energy levels that we will get from this problem have to be discrete and non-degenerate. Okay, and so the eigenfunctions are non-degenerate. That's what it means by non-degenerate states. And the wave function for psi n of x of a one-dimensional bound state system has n nodes if n equal to 0 corresponds to the ground state, and n minus 1 nodes if n equal to 1 corresponds. N minus 1 nodes if n equal to 1 corresponds to the ground state. So these are the two theorems. So we will try to see if after solving the Schrodinger equation, these two theorems hold or not for this particular problem. Okay. All right. So now let's solve for this problem. So obviously outside this region, outside 0 to a, the v of x is infinity. Okay. So there is no point in trying to solve for the Schrodinger equation outside this region because there is no particle outside this region. Okay, particle cannot move from here to the outside. Okay, all right. So v of x is infinity outside the boundary. So the wave function outside the boundary obviously becomes 0 because particle cannot go outside the boundary. So now the only place that we have to solve for this Schrodinger equation is within the boundary. So the boundary is from 0 to a. So within the boundary, we have to solve for Schrodinger equation. So we write down the Schrodinger equation, which is this, right? Minus h cross square by 2n, d square by dx square into psi of x, plus v of x, but v of x is 0. So this term, the second term becomes 0. So there is no term here, is equal to e into psi of x, right? So this is our Schrodinger equation. So now we solve for it. So I've just done some trivial algebra, bringing this to the other side and all of the usual stuff. And I've specified this term to be k square. So k square is 2me by h cross square. Okay, so this is our Schrodinger equation. All right. So if you now solve for this, the psi of x is going to be a dash e power ikx plus b dash e power minus ikx. Okay, this two things can also be written in terms of some constant a into sine kx plus some constant b into cos kx. Okay, this is the same kind of representation, just that now a and b are functions of some of these constants a dash and b dash. Okay, I hope you understand how I've gone from here to here. Okay, these are just this like similar representations of the same problem. Okay, so the solutions can be represented either in terms of e power I something or in terms of sine and cos. Okay, so these are how we represent. So in this problem, it is more convenient to represent it in terms of sine and cos. So we are going for representing it in terms of sine and cos. All right. If you have any question, please, convert this e power ikx and e power minus ikx into sine and cos function and then see whether you're getting this solution or not, whether you're getting this or not. Okay, please verify that when you're reading it. Okay, so now again, any questions up to this point? Okay, so far we've just set up the problem. All right. Okay. So now we need to find A and B. All right. So again, of course, we use the boundary conditions. Here we have two boundaries, right? One boundary is at x equal to 0 and another boundary at x equal to a. So we'll use these two boundaries. Okay. So what do we have here? We have psi of 0 is 0 because the wave function at that point becomes 0 and beyond that point is also 0. And psi of a is also 0. So these are the two boundary conditions. So if you now apply psi of 0 equal to 0, right? So you need to make x equal to 0 here, right? So sine 0 is obviously 0 and cos 0 is 1. Okay. So cos 0 is 1, and so you have only B left. So psi of 0 equal to 0 means that B is equal to 0. That's what you get from here. Okay, I'm just explaining these steps, but please do it yourself and make sure that you understand these steps. Okay, these are very important things that you need to follow. Okay, you don't have to memorize any of it. It just comes naturally. If you solve for this equation, it's going to come about naturally. All right. Then the second condition is psi of A is equal to 0, right? Because at the other boundary also the wave function becomes 0. So again so you just put A in these equations. So B is already 0, so this term becomes 0 anyway. And then here you have A sine Ka equal to 0. Now the only way that this term can be 0, that too if it is a non-trivial solution. You can get a trivial solution where A is also 0, right? Capital A is 0. But that doesn't make sense. Then it is just, then everything is 0 and then it just doesn't make sense, right? So then the non-trivial solution would be that this Ka, right? The argument of the sine function should be equal to n pi, okay? Where n is 1, 2, 3, right? Some number. Okay, some integer. All right. So if this is sine into k, sine of n pi, then it will be 0. So that means that Ka is equal to n pi. So k is equal to n pi by a. Okay. Now because k is a function of n, I've just written it as k subscript n. Okay. It's just a notation so that it's easy to know that k is a function of n. Okay. All right, so Kn is equal to n pi by a. All right, so this is the solution that we get. So finally the wave function becomes what? Wave function psi of x is a into sine kx, sine of kx, and k is nothing but n pi by a. All right, so this is our wave function. Okay. So Kn, so we have already specified here that k square is 2me by h cross square. So what we'll do is we'll equate these two terms, right? 2me by h cross square with n square pi square by a square, right? Because k is also n pi by a. So from these, equating these two, we are going to get E is equal to n square pi square h cross square by 2n a square. Okay? So this is our energy. And now you can see from this energy equation that you have got that n can only take certain values, which is some integer value 1, 2, 3, right? So En, then it means that energy can also take only certain values, okay? Which means that energy now becomes discrete. These are discrete energy levels. So we have now proved the first part of theorem 1, that energy levels of a bound state one-dimensional problem have to be discrete. Okay, so that we have shown here. So any nth level of energy, so energy of the nth level can be written as n square into energy of the first level, because first level is just pi square. So E1 is just substituting n equal to 1. So you get pi square h cross square by 2n a square, right? So E1 is this. So En can be written in terms of n square into E1, right? So this is our equation or a solution for energy. Okay, so this energy is quantized, meaning only certain values are allowed, right? So this is a discrete energy. And as per the theorem, we have obtained discrete energy levels for the bound particle. Okay. So these discrete energy levels are characteristic of only quantum mechanical particles, right? Because classically, like I've already explained earlier, particles can take any energy. So any continuous energy it can take. But because it's a quantum particle, the particle now takes only discrete energies. Okay, it cannot take continuous. It can take only certain values of energy. Okay, this is an important concept. So if you, you can also find out what is the energy difference between two successive levels, so that you can do En plus 1 minus En, and you're going to get 2n plus 1 into E1. Okay, so between any two successive levels, the energies are not constant, right? So when you draw a diagram of energy level, you have to make sure that you do not space the energy levels at equal heights, right? At equal heights from each other. You have to space them. So with each successive level, the height is going to be further and further increased, right? That is something you need to keep in mind. That's why I am showing you this term. All right. So now psi n of x is given by a into sine of n pi x by a, right? Now we still need to find a. So the way that we can find a is by normalizing this wave function. So if we normalize this wave function, I've shown the calculation here, but you can do it yourself. So if we normalize this wave function, your a is going to turn out to be root of 2 by a. Okay. So the wave function is basically root of 2 by a into sine of n pi x by a. So this is your wave function, and of course n can take values 1, 2, 3, etc. All right. So each n value represents one eigenfunction, right? One eigenfunction for one particular level of energy. Okay. So psi 1 of x represents the eigenfunction or the wave function that corresponds to the first level of energy, right? Psi 2 of x is the wave function corresponding to the second level of energy, and so on. All right. So we also, like in all the other problems, we also need to visualize what these wave functions look like. Okay. So here, any questions up to this point? All right. I've just been doing some simple calculations. Okay. There is nothing very complicated here. All right. Okay. Let me know if you have any questions. So psi n of x is equal to root of 2 by a into sine of n pi x by a. So for n equal to 1, it will just be root of 2 by a into sine of pi x by a. So if you plot this function, right, the maximum value that a sine function can take is 1, right? But it is multiplied by root of 2 by a. So the maximum value that this function can take, that psi 1 can take, will become root of 2 by a. Okay. So the maximum value is root of 2 by a, and it goes from 0 to a, and at 0 the wave function becomes 0, and at a also the wave function becomes a. And for psi 1, the maximum happens at a by 2. Right? This you can put in here and see. So pi into a by 2 by a, you will get pi by 2. So sine pi by 2 is 1. That is the maximum point. Right? So I hope this is clear. So again, what happens for, so this is psi 1, right? The first eigenfunction. What about the second eigenfunction corresponding to second energy level, E2? So again, this is the function now. So it is going to be in this form. Okay, so this is the sine function that you will get. Again, the maximum and minimum values that the sine function can take is 1 and minus 1. But it is multiplied by root of 2 by a, so you are going to get the maximum as root 2 by a and minimum as minus of root 2 by a. Okay. And now you can see that the wave function becomes 0. So in the first case, the wave function became 0 only at the boundaries, right? 0 and a. But here the wave function becomes 0 at the midpoint also, a by 2. Okay, you can just substitute a by 2 in this and see that the wave function will become 0. Okay, so this means that this psi 2 has one node. Okay, so there is one node apart from the boundary where it is becoming 0. There is also one other place in between where it is becoming 0, where the wave function is becoming 0. So that point is known as a node. Okay, so this node here is at x equal to a by 2. So this is a node. Again, for psi 3, what will happen? You will have two nodes and the wave function will oscillate like this as a sine function. Okay. So now I think it's pretty clear. So similarly for, psi 4, psi 5, you can keep extending it this way, right? So as I mentioned earlier, nodes are points where the wave function becomes 0. So here nodes are points on the x-axis within the boundary. Okay, so within the boundaries for psi 3, you have two nodes, one at a by 3, one at 2a by 3. Okay. So these are your two nodes. So I've only given you the wave function, okay? But of course you can also get the probabilities, right? So I would like you to draw the probabilities yourself, and that would be your homework. But we'll get to the homework part later. So before getting to that, before getting to probabilities, I told you while solving this equation, this Schrodinger equation for such a problem, I told you that we are only considering n equal to 1, 2, 3, etc. But we did not consider n equal to 0. Why did we not consider n equal to 0? There must be some reason, right? I mean, if we are considering n equal to 1, 2, 3, etc., why not consider also n equal to 0? Okay, but there is a problem if we consider n equal to 0, and that is why we did not consider n equal to 0. So we only started with n equal to 1, and that point E1, right, the minimum energy point here, right, the minimum energy that we got was this quantity. This is a finite quantity. It is not equal to 0. So the minimum energy that we are getting is not 0, but it is some finite quantity. And so this energy level is known as this energy is known as the 0 point energy. So it is not zero energy, but it is the 0 point energy. Okay. So it's just a term that people use when energy is not 0, but the minimum energy is some finite quantity. Then people say that it is a 0 point energy. Okay. So this 0 point energy in the case of particle in a box or particle in a infinite potential well is going to be E1, which is equal to pi square h cross square by 2m a square. Okay. So this is known as the 0 point energy. All right. Okay. So this is what I'm talking about here. So another theorem that the theorem that told us, another point that the theorem told us was that if n equal to 0 corresponds to the 0 energy, then or the 0 point energy, then the system will have n nodes. But if n equal to 1 corresponds to the 0 energy, then the system will have n minus 1 nodes. So that is also valid here. So the 0 point energy for us was at the state when n equal to 1. In that case, for all values of n, we are going to get n minus 1 node. So if n is 1, we are going to get 0 nodes. If n is 2, as in this case, we are going to get 1 node. If n is 3, we are going to get 2 nodes. Okay, so this was also a theorem that was the statement that the theorem made. And we can see that after solving the Schrodinger equation, our solution follows that theorem, right? There is no discrepancy here. All right. Any questions up to this point? I hope you're following, right? There are too many, like there are some small concepts here, but you should understand these things. Okay? Okay.
Ma'am?
Yeah.
So here we have some echo.
Yes.
So here we have considered E1 as finite because we wanted to put to the theorems that we are using here. Is that so?
No. I will get to why we have considered E1 as finite, but we will see that. Okay, I'll just get to that now. But right now, I'm just telling you that the theorem told us that if n equal to 1 is your 0 energy, then we are getting n minus 1 nodes, okay, for every wave function that we have, right, in the solution. So that is being followed. Now I still have to explain to you why we did not consider n equal to 0, right? So that I still have to explain to you, okay? I'm getting to that. All right. Again, the theorem also states that the energy level of a bound state are not degenerate. Okay, so this is also true. Okay, because for each energy level we have only one eigenfunction, right? It's not that for like we have many eigenfunctions for the same level. Okay, in that case the system would be degenerate, right? But if we have for every eigenvalue, if there is only one eigenfunction, then we know that it is not degenerate, right? So that's what we are we are getting here also. So for E1 we are getting psi1, for E2 we are getting psi2, for E3 we are getting psi3. These are all different eigenfunctions, right? So we are basically getting non-degenerate eigen values as well as non-degenerate eigen functions. Okay, so that is also another theorem, and we are getting that. All right. Then another thing which is not related to the theorem as such, but another point that one can see from these wave functions is that the wave functions corresponding to different energy levels are orthogonal. Okay, so how will you check that? You just do the integration over psi m star of x into psi n of x dx from 0 to a, right? You only do from 0 to a the integration, because beyond 0, right, before 0, before x equal to 0 and beyond x equal to a, the wave function is 0. So there is no point in doing integration over there. So only place you are doing the integration, the region is from 0 to a. So if you do this integration, you are going to get delta n, right? You can check this for yourself. Just take some function, psi n, and so take m equal to n and n equal to n plus 1, and you can verify for yourself what is the value you are getting. You will get 0, okay, as the answer. All right, so the most general solution for the time-dependent Schrodinger's equation is given by, you can just add up all the solutions, so psi n of x into e power minus I e n t by h cross. Okay, so this is your most general solution. So I'm just substituting for psi n of x here, and for en I'm substituting n square e1. All right, so this is our solution. Now the homework for you here is, I have only talked about the graph of wave function versus x, but I didn't tell you how the probability distribution will look versus x. Okay, but this is also an important concept, so this is your homework. So you need to find what is the probability of finding the particle at a position x within the well. So this probability you need to write down. Then you need to draw the p of x versus x. So this is one homework. Second one is, what is the probability of finding the particle outside the well. Then third is, calculate expectation value of x, okay, for this system, and calculate uncertainty in x. That is, you have to calculate delta x. So you have the wave function here, so you should be able to get all of these from the wave function, okay, and the way the problem has been set up. All right. I think by now you should already know how to do these things, right? There is no mystery here. Like, we have already learned how to get probability, how to get expectation value, how to get uncertainty, right? Everything is known to us. So you just need to calculate that and get it. All right. So now let's come to 0 point energy. Okay. Why did we not choose the value n equal to 0 while solving for Schrodinger's equation, right? So there must be a reason. So what does n equal to 0 represent? Okay, if n was equal to 0, k would have been 0. If k was 0, energy would have been 0, right? So if energy would have been 0, what does that mean? That means that the particle has no energy, meaning the particle has no momentum, right? Meaning the particle is at rest. Okay, so particle is at rest. Okay, but the particle is not supposed to be at rest. As in, there is a particle. Basically, if the particle is at rest, what will happen is, we are assuming that the momenta is 0. So that is a finite momenta. Okay, if the momenta is finite, then the uncertainty in delta is, so uncertainty in the position will become infinite, right? But the particle can only be tracked within 0 and a. So the uncertainty in the particle has to be a. It cannot be something beyond a. You understand? Okay, so if the uncertainty in the particle position is something not beyond a, then how can the momenta be something that is very finite? Okay, so that comes about from the Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. So let's go through it again. So if n is equal to 0, if we put n equal to 0, then we are getting energy will be equal to 0. Okay, if energy is equal to 0, and if n is 0, it means the momentum of the particle is 0. So if the momentum of particle is 0, that means the particle has no velocity, which means the particle is at rest. Okay, but particle is not really at rest because the uncertainty in position is a. Okay, so length a, that is the length of the boundary, the region between the two boundaries. The total length is a. Okay, so delta x is nearly equal to a. So delta p has to be greater than, it has to follow the Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. Okay, but if the particle is at rest, so if we know what exactly the momentum of the particle is, then the uncertainty in the momentum will become 0, right? So but that is not the case. The uncertainty in momentum has to follow the Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. Okay, so if delta x is a, then delta p will correspond to h cross by 2a, right? And so the minimum kinetic energy is anyway given by, so if we consider our E1, then we have given that E1 is nearly of the order of h cross square by 2m a square, right? Because E1 is equal to pi square h cross square by 2m a square, and this is the 0-point energy. So that is the reason why we cannot take n equal to 1, because if we take we cannot take n equal to 0. Because if we take n equal to 0, then it violates the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. And that is why there is no minimum energy. That is, the minimum energy is not 0, but the minimum energy is some finite value, and that finite value is pi square h cross square by 2m a square. So this energy is known as the 0-point energy. Is this clear? Any questions here? Okay, please try to wrap this around your head that this is how it will, as in this is why we have the 0-point energy and not zero energy. Okay, all right. So the natural consequence of this is that, of course, delta p, that is uncertainty in momentum, is inversely proportional to a, right? The length a. So if the width of the well decreases, so if it decreases from a to a by 2, then the uncertainty in momentum is going to increase, right? And if the width increases, right, from a to 2a, then the uncertainty in momentum will decrease, right? That is a natural consequence here. All right. So the more confined the particle becomes, the faster it will move between the boundaries. So if width of the well decreases from a to a by 2, uncertainty in momentum increases, which means the particle is going to start moving faster and faster. And the corollary is also true. If width increases, then uncertainty in momentum decreases. That means the particle becomes slow. But the particle can become slow, but it cannot become slower than E1, than whatever momenta corresponding to E1, right? So it can never become 0, right? So that is the point here. Okay. So conversely, if the width of the well increases, delta P decreases. If delta P decreases, energy will decrease, but it will never become 0. All right. So 0-point energy reflects the minimum motion of the particle due to localization. Okay, so this represents or reflects the minimum motion. So the particle has to have some minimum motion, and therefore it has to have some minimum energy. The energy cannot be 0. So 0-point energy occurs in all bound state potentials. So every bound state potential that we will encounter, it will have a 0-point energy, meaning the energy will not be equal to 0. The minimum energy will not be equal to 0, but it will be some finite quantity, and that is called as 0-point energy. Okay. All right. So one of the consequence, or one of the points regarding 0-point energy is that if there was no 0-point energy, right? If the particle was actually at rest, then what would happen is, so if you have an atom, right? Atom has electrons and nuclei. So if the particle was at rest, then the electrons would just fall into the nuclei, okay? Because the electron will also become at rest, okay? But the electrons are in constant motion around the nuclei, okay? So that kind of reflects that without 0-point, so that kind of reflects the 0-point motion of the electron, okay? So this is an important point. This is why we need the 0-point energy. Is this clear? Okay, I hope this is clear now. Let me see if you have any questions. All right. So one of the variations of the problem that we have solved today, okay, the problem that we solved today was v of x going to plus infinity, x is less than 0, then 0 from 0 to a and plus infinity, x greater than a. That was the original problem. So one of the variations could be that we can just translate this region, the boundary region, the well region by a by 2, and then what we can do is v of x will be plus infinity when x is less than minus a by 2, 0 when it is this, when it is between minus a by 2 and x and a by 2, and again plus infinity when x is greater than a by 2. So we are just translating it by half, right? So I guess I should have drawn the picture here, but I forgot to draw it. But I guess you guys can draw the picture yourself and see, right? Basically, it's the same problem, but just that the regions are slightly shifted to the left. Okay. So again, this is a bound state. So the energy spectrum will be discrete. The energy levels will be non-degenerate, right? And again, the same thing about the nodes, right? Where if you 0 point energy corresponds to n equal to 1, so you will have n minus 1 nodes for every eigenfunction. Okay, so that will still hold. All right, so energy spectrum remains unaffected. The energy levels are still discrete and non-degenerate, and Hamiltonian is invariant under spatial translations. Okay, so if you take the commutator of Hamiltonian with momenta, you are going to get 0. Okay, now also if the potential is symmetric, as in this case, so here what happens is the potential is symmetric. So V of minus x is equal to V of plus x, right? Eigenfunctions of bound states must be either even or odd. So this is another kind of a theorem which we can obtain here, all right, which we will see that it actually holds for this particular system. So, so in the previous case, okay, let me go back to the previous definition of the problem. So in this case, the V of minus x is not equal to V of x, right? Because because in this region it is 0, here it is plus infinity, here again it's infinity. So V of minus x is not equal to V of x. But in the second problem, this variant of the problem that we are looking at, we see that V of minus x, right? When x is negative, that is same as V of plus x, right? Because this is a symmetric potential. All right. So in the case of a symmetric potential, the eigenfunctions will either be an even function or an odd function. Okay. So that is something that we have to see. So now, in our case, what is the obvious even and odd function? So even function is a cos function and odd function is a sine function, right? So we will see how it reduces to one of the two. Okay, so psi of x, okay, if you solve for this Schrodinger equation for this system, you will get psi of x is equal to same thing, a sine kx plus b cos kx. Okay, and now you have to use the two boundary conditions that the wave function at minus a by 2 is 0 and the wave function at plus a by 2 is also 0. So if you use these, boundary conditions, you are going to get for psi of minus a by 2 equal to 0, you get minus a sine ka by 2 plus b cos ka by 2 equal to 0. And for psi of a by 2 equal to 0, you're going to get a sine ka by 2 plus b cos. Right? So now if you solve for this, you will get 2b cos ka by 2 equal to 0 and a sine ka by 2 equal to 0. Okay, so now you can solve separately. So if this term is 0, yes, any question? So Gaurav is asking something. So in an article in a magazine, once I heard about vacuum energy, which I could remember is a special type of 0 point energy. But how can we use this quantum vacuum? Actually, I have no idea about this. So maybe you can point me to the article and then maybe I can look at it. Okay? Because I really don't know what this vacuum energy is.
Actually, hello.
Yeah.
Ma'am, actually, the article is about the background energy of all the like. It's like the creating of universe. So they're just talking about like the how the 0 point energy could lead to one kind of uh, principle where we can explain how the matter is like how the quantum particle is behaving. Like I don't know, I mean the whole situation.
Okay. So one thing obviously is that if 0 point energy was zero, right? So basically if the energy was zero, right, then there is no way for the particle to move further, right? Because the particle is all going to be at rest. So maybe they are trying to relate it with that at least there should be some finite energy that the particle should have so that the processes can start. If the particle does not have any finite energy, then no process can start. Like in the beginning of the universe, so many, I mean, I don't know, like, I don't know what they're talking about. Maybe they're talking about Big Bang, maybe they're talking about the collisions of the various particles and formation of the new particles and stuff like that. So in that case, there should be some finite energy for anything to happen. So
Yeah,
maybe
yeah,
that.
yeah, you're right. You're right. It's what I remember. They're talking like this. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So my guess is that, yeah, I mean, you need to have some finite energy, otherwise nothing will happen. So for any process to happen, some finite energy should be there. The particle should have some finite energy, and that is where the 0 point energy comes in. Meaning the minimum energy is not zero, right? That is what you mean by 0 point energy. Okay?
Yeah. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so you can solve these two cases separately, and if you solve it separately, so if you're saying that cos term is zero, then the argument of the cos term should be equal to n pi by 2, right? Because only if it is n pi by 2, then this term will become zero. So from here you can get what kn is, and you will get this equation for the psi n of x. So in this case, n is 1, 3, and 5. Okay, these are only the odd n terms. And if you solve for this function, right, when will this term be zero? When the argument of sine function has to be equal to n pi, right? Um, why have I written n pi by 2? Okay, looks like, okay. I've written n pi by 2 because I'm considering only even n. Okay, that's why I've written n pi by 2. So if you consider only even n, that is 2, 4, 6, then you are basically, you can write n pi by 2 for the, so ka, so the argument of the sine function can take values which are n pi by 2 if n is even, right? So in that case, kn again becomes equal to n pi by a. So you get these two functions. So one function, one eigenfunction you get for n equal to 1, 3, and 5, and another one you get for n equal to 2, 4, 6. So something like that. Yes, I think someone has a question. No. All right. So these are the two wave functions that you get. So for different n, you're going to get different wave function. Okay. So the solution of the Schrodinger equation can then be written as a combination, as basically these two, right, separately. So when n is odd, you are writing it as root of 2 by a cos of n pi x by a, and when n is even, you are writing the solution of the wave function to be root of 2 by a into sine of n pi x by a. Okay. So in this function, you can see because this is a cos function, this is an even function, right? So it is symmetric. And this is a sine function, so this is an uneven. So it is a, odd function, basically. So this is an anti-symmetric function. Okay, so these are the, so this is the difference. Okay, when you go from zero, when the potential value was between 0 and a, then you had only one function as your final solution for the wave function. Okay, but when the potential is shifted and it becomes a symmetric potential, then the wave function has to be either an even function or an odd function. Okay, and that is how, that is what the theorem says, and that is what we have also got. Is that clear? So this is the difference that I wanted to show you about. All right. Any questions?